Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe. And today we're going to be looking at a plugin for Grasshopper called Weaverbird. What does Weaverbird do? Well, it does a few things, and primarily what I like to use it for is when I create low polygon models, like you see this one here that I've just clicked on. Low polygon, very faceted, easy on the computer, not a lot of faces. From that low polygon model, I can create something very organic and very unique, like you see here. So the second object, this object that I just clicked on, was created using Weaverbird. So that's what we're going to look at today, and here you see a little outline of that. Alright, before we dive in, I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel. If you haven't subscribed, you'll have this little button here. You all know it's red. Go ahead and click on it. It'll change to subscribe, and also click on the little bell so you get notifications of when my videos are coming out. I have a lot of videos here, and I've been updating these quite a bit, very often recently. So you'll enjoy the channel, I guarantee it. So go ahead and subscribe, and I really do appreciate this online community that we're creating. It's growing more and more every day. I'd like to get to 5,000 subscribers soon. I'm almost there, so if you can help with that, that would be great. Also, go ahead and reach out to me on Instagram. My account is my first name, Alfonso, _ my last name, Peluso. And you can see what I'm up to on a daily basis, whether it's working with my Columbia College students, my IIT students, if I'm doing a little scratching to relieve some stress, making some videos. So go ahead and follow me on Instagram. I'd love to connect with you. Okay, now the plugin that we're going to look at is Weaverbird, and it was created by Giulio Piacentino, a fellow Italian, and you can go to his website. It's his first name, last name.com, or you could search Weaverbird 3D and you'll find his website. So just to look at some examples in architecture, I like to look at Norman Foster's British Museum in London, which is actually an addition to an older building, as you can see here. And he enclosed this courtyard in glass. And you can see this very undulating pillow-like form. And to create that pillow-like form, it's made of a bunch of planar triangles, and later on in today's tutorial we'll look at a subdivision routine called loop subdivision made by Charles Loop, which will allow you to take a freeform surface and subdivide it into triangles. And why would you do that? So that would make it buildable. That would take this, that's one way to make this freeform surface buildable, and also make it buildable in a less expensive way than making curved glass, like we've seen Zaha Hadid make some curved glass, which is pretty cool. Alright, so let's jump into the tutorial. Look at that, I got a new light there. Sounds, maybe that's one of you watching the video right now. I hope so. So wherever you're at, I'm here in Chicago. It's a windy day. It's winter now. It's not that cold yet, so I'm grateful for that. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day, whether you're still in school or you just finished up some finals or you're working or whatever. I hope you're having a great day. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do here is we want to turn on our mesh edges. So Control M is a shortcut, or you can go up in Grasshopper, you can go under Display, and you can go down and you can choose Preview Mesh Edges. And that's off by default. You're going to want to turn that on. So that's Control M to turn that on. Okay, so we need some geometry. To start applying the subdivision routines to and working with Weaverbird. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the blank file and go ahead and, I guess it wasn't blank. I'll just go ahead and hide these. We might want to bring those back. Okay, so we'll look at it a couple ways. First, we'll look at Weaverbird, and we can create some primitives in Weaverbird, some primitive geometry. So here's my my WB tab. It's you know, my window is you know, not very large here, so we're just seeing the W. And under define, we can choose one of the pre-made objects. Now we're going to come back and look at using Weaverbird on a simple surface or a mesh, but for right now we can look at it with one of these primitive geometry. So let's go ahead and just choose a dodecahedron. It's one of my favorites there. It's a 12-sided pentagon. Alright, so we see that there. Okay, and just so we have some number sliders, so that has a radius of 5, so let's go with that. Okay, so there is our dodecahedron. Okay, so what can we start to do with that? Well, we have a couple things. One is called picture frame, and one is called mesh thicken, and I'll explain those as we go. So these are found under the transform panel. So I'll go under the transform panel, and I'm going to choose picture frame, and I'll go ahead and plug that in. Okay, so what we're getting here is we are getting, if I use a scribble, we are getting a two-dimensional mesh. Okay, and I'll explain that a little bit more. So that's giving us a two-dimensional mesh because we started with, if I just copy and paste this, we've started with polylines. Okay, that's what we've started with. That's what Weaverbird gave us when it made this dodecahedron. So we went from polylines to two-dimensional mesh. So here you see the two-dimensional mesh. Okay, now I have a distance that I can control. That distance is set to 5 at the moment. I'm working in inches, so let me double click and type in 12, and let's take a look at this. So this is opening and closing that. Let's see how far I can get before it gets closed, somewhere around there. Okay, so we're seeing that open and close. Okay, so now I want to make this 3D. I want to give this a thickness. So I can use a mesh thicken capsule. Same place under transform. Alright, and we'll go ahead and plug in our mesh. Alright, and that has a distance. Now, the distance for the 2D mesh, I found that pretty reliable. However, unfortunately for the offset mesh, I haven't really figured that one out. Maybe some of you guys can comment down below on what the units are for that, because that's set to 5, and this thing is wonderfully, you know, pretty large there. So I don't think it's 5 feet because my grid is only set up to 24 inches by 24 inches. So anyway, if someone knows, that would be great. So I'm going to try something small like 1.555, and I'll plug that into the distance, and then I can go even smaller if I need to. Alright, so tough to see on the display there. Let's get a better look at this by using one of my favorites, which is a custom preview. And we'll go ahead and plug that in, and by default, oh yes, by default it's that awesome Pepto-Bismol pink we have going on right there. Alright, and as I go, I'll probably start to turn some of these things off just so we can see things a little bit better. Okay. Now what view are we in? We got shaded, we got wire. Wireframe looks a little bit better with the custom preview because then we can see these mesh edges. So this is, if I copy and paste this is the 3D mesh. Okay. Alright, let me try our shortcut, Control M. So you see those mesh lines. If you're not seeing mesh lines, you want to use Control M to turn those back on. Alright, so this is pretty cool. Alright, we have some interesting interesting geometry being created here, and we have some control over the oculi, or the window opening here. That's pretty cool. And we have some control over how thin or thick this is. Okay, and this is creating good mesh geometry. This is 3D printable. If I was to right click on this output and go ahead and bake that, okay, I'm in a command. Thank you for letting me know. At least you let me know, and I wasn't sitting here in the middle of a command wondering why I wouldn't bake. So I'm grateful for that. So I'm going to right click and bake and put that on the default layer, and I'll go ahead and select it, type in the command check, and look at that. This is a it doesn't say it's a good mesh anymore. Rhino McNeil, why'd you do that to us? We really enjoyed it being good or bad. But anyway, so it doesn't have any naked edges, which is really what I'm looking for when I'm 3D printing. So that is good news. So we have good mesh geometry there. Okay, so you saw a little bit of Weaverbird there. Not quite what I showed you in the beginning, but some pretty good stuff here coming from a dodecahedron. Okay, so we looked at Control M, we looked at picture frame, we looked at mesh thicken. We haven't looked at applying multiple values yet, and I think I'm going to save that because I think that is the coolest thing you can do. So we'll save that. The next thing is importing meshes or surfaces from Rhino. So just want you to know that you don't have to, and chances are you're probably not going to use these standard primitive geometries. You're going to make something, whether it's in Rhino or whether it's in Grasshopper. Either way, it could be Rhino or Grasshopper, and that might be a mesh, it might be a surface. So let's start out with a mesh. So I'm just going to use the command mesh plane. Okay, mesh plane, and you see it has an X and a Y count. Now, by default, those are 10 and 10. I at some point set that to 3. And I set the Y count to 4 just to have something with a little bit less geometry in it. And now I'm going to go ahead and make that mesh plane. So there's my mesh. If I change that to be shaded, you'll see simple mesh. Okay, let's go ahead and bring the mesh into Rhino. So I'm going to do this through a mesh container. I probably said bring the mesh into Rhino. I think I heard that. I caught that. So I'm going to bring that mesh into Grasshopper from Rhino. Okay, I'm going to right click, choose set one mesh, go ahead and pick it. Alright, there's my mesh object. So now I can do something very similar. Okay, I can basically plug this in instead, and let's see what's going to happen there. Okay, so this looks pretty good, right? It looks like a cushion. Let's use my zoom scale here. Okay. All right, so some similar things I can do, right? I can work with that distance of the opening, and then I can work with the thickness of the object. So you can do that if you make a mesh. If you're just making a mesh in Rhino or in Grasshopper. Either way, that can get plugged in. You see it says mesh / polylines. Okay, so let's we'll say that this is our 2D mesh from Rhino. Okay, now does it work for a surface? Well, sure it does. Let's walk through that. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the command plane. And I'm going to make a plane. It looks about square. I'm going to make a plane. And I'm also, well, let's take this one step at a time. Okay, so I'm going to bring that into Grasshopper. So here we go. That's my surface container. I'm going to right click, set one surface. Okay. Now if I plug this directly in, alright, input M must be made of meshes or a list of closed polylines. If you're using polylines, remember those got to be closed. Alright, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so how do I turn this into a mesh? Well, There are a couple ways to do it. Now, mesh B-rep, a lot of people come across that one. Create a mesh that approximates B-rep geometry. If I plug this one in, okay. Now with this one, it looks decent. We'll see later on when we rebuild this that we have some problems with that. So just keep in mind, I like a different capsule. I prefer a different capsule, but let's go ahead and plug this guy in. Alright, so not much going on there because we don't have much subdivision, but it is working. Let's take a look at that. Alright, so these are good starts here. So we've done this with the dodecahedron. Right, there's that. There's our dodecahedron. We've done it with a mesh from Rhino, and we've done it with a surface from Rhino. Oops. There's the surface from Rhino. Okay. Alright. Let's just change this. Okay, so let's get into the good stuff here. So one thing that we can start to do is we can use mesh subdivision components from Weaverbird, and we see here there's a panel called Subd, and we have a list of these subdivision routines, and we can use these to do a lot of things. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, is we can take something that's relatively low polygon, like this object here is pretty low polygon, and we can smooth it with some subdivision routines. And where you do the subdivision routine is important because it creates different effects. For instance, I could subdivide this dodecahedron right out of the gate, right out of this output, or I can do a whole bunch of things in Weaverbird like we've already done and then do the subdivision. And we're going to want to look at both of those because it creates a very different effect. So where you're doing subdivision, that's up to you, but just keep in mind that it's different if it's before the picture frame and the mesh thicken or after the picture frame and the mesh thicken. Okay, right now we're going to look at doing it after. Okay, Weaverbird Catmale Clark. I'll talk about that in a second. Weaverbird's Catmale Clark subdivision. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug that in. Okay, let's move this guy so we can see what's happening. Let's move that here. Okay, so looks a lot different. So what we had before was something faceted. I know that's not that easy to read, but not too bad. Okay, so we had that, and then some mesh smoothing, and we have that. Okay, so you're seeing it's applying a subdivision. It's applying a smoothing, and the level of that smoothing is only between 1 and 3. Okay, it can't be any less than 1 or any more than 3. Okay, so level of smoothing between 1 and 3. Okay, so let's take a look at what that means. By default, the level is 1. So I'm going to make a number slider. I'm going to double click, type in 1 less than 3. That's going to give me a number slider that goes from 1, 2, and 3. And we'll go ahead and plug that in, and you're going to see that is at 1, which is the default. Let's take a look at what is 2. There's 2, smoother, and 3, even smoother. So pretty cool. So what I do like this Catmale Clark. I am drawn to the Catmale Clark subdivision. I do like the aesthetic. Okay, what is this Catmale Clark? Who is this Catmale Clark? All right, so let's jump over here. So you type in Catmale Clark subdivision surface, you get some nice images. It talks about it being devised by Edwin Catmull and Jim Clark. It says in 1978. Thank you, Wikipedia. All right, let's go over to Edwin Catmull. Pretty cool stuff about Edwin here that we look at. He is a retired American computer scientist and former president of Pixar. Pretty cool. And Walt Disney Animation Studios. So that's that is pretty cool stuff. I was looking at some other stuff. So as doctoral advisor, I think it's James Clark. That's the one that stuck out to me. So we'll look at that in a second. But here's his thesis: a subdivision algorithm for computer display of curved surfaces. That just makes me feel like I haven't done enough in this world. When you have someone, you look at their thesis and they've really contributed something to computational design, something that we use every day. So all you PhD students out there, here's one to live up to. All right, let's look at James H. Clark, another American entrepreneur and computer scientist. This is the one that stuck out to me. This is probably dates me. I don't know if some of my audience out there, you might not know what Netscape is because it's not around anymore, but that was the premier web browser back in the day. And then he's done some other stuff since then. His doctoral advisor, Ivan Sutherland. If you don't know who Ivan Sutherland is, take a look at what he did for his thesis, which I think is even better than what these guys ended up doing. Basically, Ivan Sutherland created the first CAD system over at MIT, and there's some really cool videos of Ivan Sutherland. You'll wonder how it took so long to get to a parametric software when he created it in the 1960s. So that's pretty cool. So that's enough about where Catmale Clark subdivision comes from, and then here you have it. So we see what's happening here. Some really nice quad subdivision we're getting on it, some quadrilaterals, which is pretty cool. Now, should we just plug in these others really quick and just see what happens? So instead we have this guy over here. Pretty cool. I mean, it's flat, but interesting. You see that and I guess what you see here is it's pulling in from the edges. You're getting these rounded corners, and then what's our surface look like? It's just the one surface. Should we rebuild that? Let's do it. Now's a good time to rebuild. I'm typing in rebuild. This was my default from before, 6 in the U, 6 in the V. Let's go with 8 in the V. We'll make it a little bit non-uniform. Click OK. Look at that. Looks very similar to the mesh. So that's all working. Let's go back to this. Okay. All right, so now we have the subdivision already plugged in, and that's after the picture frame and the mesh thicken. There's other subdivision routines that I want to look at. Before we do it, let's just keep going. Let's follow this train down the track here. So that was the Catmale Clark after the picture frame and the mesh thicken. I mentioned we could also do it right here, right before we do the picture frame and the mesh thicken. So let's see what we got here. So this is that's our geometry. This is our faceted geometry, right? So low polygon. Low polygon is becoming quite famous recently. We have Elon Musk. We have Tesla's new Cybertruck, which is low polygon, and I don't know if you follow it. There's a designer out there called Rem Koolhaas. not the Rem Koolhaas that we all know. This is Rem D. Koolhaas. Go ahead and search Rem D. Koolhaas. He's from a company called United Nude and UnitedNude.com, and he's doing some really great work out there. And he has some low polygon cars that were out before the Cybertruck by Tesla. Anyway, back to the tutorial. I digress. Okay, so what can we do here? We can add the Catmale Clark. So I'll go ahead and pull that down. Actually, can I just make our life easier and take this, copy, paste. Let's get this over here. Alright, so we're going to plug this in here. So let's take a look at those two. And this is at 3. Okay, so there's one. There is one. And let's make this more clear. Alright, so turn that one on. Alright, get rid of this. Alright, I'm going to change this to be, that is wireframe. Alright, it's showing me this all the way down here. I didn't turn that off. Alright, let me try this again. Select this, Shift Control I, it selects everything else, preview off. There we go. Alright, so there you see that. Now to go, this didn't really help. I tried to make it easier for you guys to see there, and I was totally unsuccessful with that. Alright, so let's try that. Okay, so there's the original dodecahedron. There is the smooth version of it. Okay, so it's smoothing it out. It's taking something that's faceted, that's low polygon, and it's adding more polygons to it. Okay, now I can also plug that in instead. Oh, I used the Shift key. What's wrong with me? That's a great way to make that crash. Okay, it didn't crash. We got lucky. All right. So what's that going to look like at the very end? I don't know. We got to turn that on. Okay. All right. So it's just more subdivided than it was. Okay, in this case. All right. So what does it look like before we even get to that subdivision? Let's take a look. Okay. So we have something like that. Hope you're still following at home. Alright, so plug this guy in. I'm going to unplug this one for now. Alright, so this is the dodecahedron that has been subdivided. Okay, and you can see that subdivision. And then we go ahead and subdivide this one more time to smooth that out, and we get something like that. All right, so I think that's a pretty good intro. I can take this down. Doesn't have to be so much smoothing on it. Okay, so let's take this a little bit further. Let's try to get something like what we had in the beginning, what I showed you at the very beginning. So let's see what I can do. Let's see what I can do. If I type in the command show, we already have a mesh there. So let's hide some of this other stuff. Basically, I'm gonna unplug some plugs. All right, just bear with me. All right, let's take a look at this. All right, there we go. Let's set up this stuff's a little smaller, so set up my zoom scale. So we went from this on the top to this on the bottom. Let's see. All right, maybe shaded. There we go. All right, so this right here, what is it? Let me type in what. That is a valid mesh. All right, so that's usable. That is certainly usable. So let's move some of this stuff out of the way, and let's bring in a mesh. Another 2D mesh from Rhino, which is going to be this one that I have selected there. So let's go ahead, let's right click, set one mesh, pick that one. Okay, there, it's in there, the capsule's in there. I turn the preview on, there it is. Okay, alright, so we can subdivide this. So let's look at subdividing it first. Trying to do this neatly as possible. Okay. All right. Let's move. Bear with me. Let me move some of this stuff down. Give myself some room. Move these two text objects down. Okay, so we're doing pretty good here. All right, so here's our mesh. We're going to go ahead right off the bat, and we're going to subdivide that mesh. Okay. Wow, that got funky really fast. All right, because we're seeing so much stuff down the road. I only want to see things one at a time, so I'm going to make sure that we're disconnecting this so we can just see it as we go. And we're going to talk about some things that we haven't talked about too, right? Because we've talked about Control M mesh edges, picture frame, mesh thicken. We're saving that one for later, applying multiple values. We've imported meshes and surfaces from Rhino. We made sure that works. We talked about mesh subdivision, and the order is important, whether you do that before your picture frame and mesh thicken or after your picture frame and mesh thicken. We looked at Catmale Clark. So three things three things we need to look at: constant quads, loop, and applying multiple values. 3 things. So we'll get to those. We will get to those. Alright. So let's hide that, what we have in Rhino. Let's also hide this one. Okay. So there you see a pretty picture of a Catmale Clark subdivision. And before I go, I'm noticing this one. I left you guys hanging with this B-rep setting here. The one that you want to use, and maybe I'll get a chance to look at it, you want to use this one instead. You want to use this mesh surface, because this one it rebuilds the mesh basically, and you have settings of UV count, so use that one over that one. Okay. Alright, so here is the Catmale Clark. What does this look like with one of the other ones? A loop subdivision. Okay, loop subdivision right there. It says Charles Loop, 1987. This was his mathematics thesis. Another thesis. Alright, and that's going to give me triangles. Okay, and we're going to see that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unplug this one. And I'm going to plug that one in. Let's try that again. I'm going to plug that one in. Okay, so there you see it. Triangles. Alright, which where's the triangles lead me back to? The triangles lead me back to Norman Foster, right there. The triangles. Okay, rationalize. That was a term I was looking for earlier. Taking this free-form surface and rationalizing it into something buildable. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. And if you want to build something out of triangles, then you're going to do it with the Catmale Clark, not the Catmale Clark, the loop subdivision. That's going to give you all triangles. And there's other ones here for you to play with. There's constant quads, give you constant quad, so 4-sided all the time. Not a mix of triangles and quads, which you'll sometimes get from these subdivision routines. So loop is all triangles. Alright, just wanted to cover that one. So we're getting there. Let's go ahead and continue with the Catmale Clark. Take this one away. Okay, so there you see Catmale Clark, and we'll play around with the levels of subdivision later. Alright, so the next thing that we can do with that is we can use a picture frame. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's go ahead and plug that in. Okay, I want to unplug these as we go. Alright, turn that one on. Okay, so there's our picture frame. Let's go ahead and turn this off. A lot of turning on and off as we go, but I think it's important so you guys can see. Alright, so it turns that into this beautiful structure, this new structural topology, we'll call it. Got this really nice, beautiful pattern topology. So that's the 2D. And then we're going to go ahead and plug that in to our mesh thicken. Turn that into a 3D mesh. Give it some thickness. All right, how does that look? A little bit too thick. That's what we were getting in the beginning, really thick. All right, this is a tiny little model that I've generated here. Okay, look at that. We got thickness on that. That's awesome. And now we can do some smoothing. So we're trying to get to what we have in this object below. We're almost there. So I will go ahead and plug this into the smoothing, and we'll go ahead and turn that on, and we'll turn this one off. It's starting to get pretty intense on my computer. You might hear my fan. My fan's been off this long. I hate when my fan kicks on and I'm doing a video, because you you get that noise in there, and it sounds unprofessional. All right, so look at that, getting pretty close. So what are we missing? What are we missing to get to this, to what we have down here below? Well, I'll tell you. Let's go look at our outline over here. All right, so we've done everything on here. Catmale Clark, didn't talk too much about constant quads, but I showed you where it was. We looked at loop. So we're left with applying multiple values. That's how we get from this top mesh to this bottom mesh. And you know me, I'm a huge fan of multiple values because I think that's what Grasshopper is really good at. And if that's what Grasshopper is really good at, let's take advantage of it. So where are those multiple values being applied? Well, they can be applied in a couple places. One is here in, this is creating our window openings, okay? So you can see that it can get really closed up and it can get really open. Well, why stop with one value? Why do we only need one value there? We can have, that's another place for multiple values, and there's lots of ways to do that, and I'll put a link at the end of this tutorial to a video where I talk just about that. So I'll go ahead and plug this in. That's the same value, but I'm going to lower this down. Okay, so now we're getting some organic tessellation in there, some non-repetitive tessellation, which if you ask my students, I talk a lot about that. Okay, let's kick this one up and go ahead and plug that in. You know, I don't know how many of these I can plug in, but I can certainly plug in a few. So there's some. We have that looking pretty unique. Still not what I have down below. We're almost there, I promise you that. And that's going to happen here with the distances. This is another place where I can apply multiple values. So go ahead and plug this one in. And let's take a look. Look at that. That's pretty wild. Okay, it gets pretty thick pretty fast. All right, so let's move you down. Okay, my computer fan's kicking on. I'll try to lean back so it doesn't go into the sound so much. Okay, there's another one. Alright, pretty cool. Not as cool as the one below. Maybe I just need to subdivide it. Let me I don't know what the point would be in saving. If it crashes, the video's over. But you do have to be careful. We could get this to crash pretty quickly. So let's take a look. That mesh smoothing is 2 right there. I'm going to save this guy. Alright, so what happens when I kick that up to 3? That's really not what I'm looking for, because that's the mesh itself. You see that? So this is good to look at. That's the mesh, the end result mesh. So it's not really adding more circles, right? This isn't adding more or less circles. That's going to happen at my first mesh subdivision, which is right here. This is where I'm going to get more circles. So let's try 2. There you go. Look at, I told you we'd get there. I told you we would get there, and there you have it. All right, this is fun. I have a lot of fun with Weaverbird. I think it's a great one. If you found this video helpful, or if you just enjoyed it, go ahead and click the like button. Do not forget to subscribe. Follow me on YouTube. Trying to get to 5,000. Hope we get there soon. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notifications, and click on some of the links that are going to pop up all around. My face is going to pop up. I just put a new icon with a new picture, my 2019-2020 picture. All right, so I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.